but he came here as an assistant professor in 78, was promoted to an associate professor in like 82 or 83, I think. Professor in 88, 89, somewhere like that. And since then, he's stayed here. He's now professor of agronomy. He's also the director of the Iowa Water Center. He's one of the 200 most cited faculty members at Iowa State University. He's one of the 200 most cited faculty members in soil science worldwide. On top of that, so with that, he has 121 refereed publications. I think his I-10 is like 51 or something like that. But anyway, this is Dr. Cruse. He's going to tell us about who he is and what he thinks about his reflection. So Dr. Cruse, please come up and speak. But he's had a wonderful career. And he's having a wonderful career.
And Lee did this without any notes. How long did you study that?
I looked at it this morning real quick.
Real quick?
Yeah, I'm serious.
Wow. Amazed, impressed. As a sidebar, I said I wasn't going to do this, but I've got to. Lee was a graduate student when I was here working with Tom Benton. And he's one of the few graduate students that have really kind of chewed my tail for
I've always regretted that, but anyway.
No. That was good. One of my graduate students misused a piece of equipment that he had, so. Anyway, yeah. Well, changes there are coming. I must be a friend. We don't change the way we farm. It just might end. I plowed my field so many times and now I must pay. I've asked the Lord's forgiveness. Don't wash my soil away. I was just a young man. My daddy said, hey, son, buy the biggest tractor, man. That makes farming fun. I shopped around until I found the biggest I could buy. Now I understand how it hurt my land. I hang my head and cry. It's all over now. I sold that plow. Erosion has to end. Work with Mother Nature, man. She is my friend. I manage land with a gentle hand. It's more fun for me. With better soil health, I have more wealth. Productivity. Learn from Mother Nature. Crops working side by side. Prairie strips and cover crops with no-till is my pride. My farm is strong. It will last long. It will never end. Soil health's my mission, and we're making soil our friend. We've learned from Mother Nature, and we're making soil our friend. Okay, somebody's got to be thinking. Not going to quit my day job. It ain't going to happen. Somebody has to be thinking it. If they're not, they should be. What is this goofy guy doing, and why is he doing it? And I was sitting. You said I could tell some stories along the way, right? Okay. I was sitting in a tree hunting deer, and frustrations were growing because there were deer showing up, and this song kept going through my head. The lyrics, the tune, and I couldn't get rid of it. And as my frustrations kind of peaked, I asked myself, you know, I've got an extension appointment. I said, could we put a soil conservation message to a tune that farmers know, farmers make decisions, and might that resonate in their mind, that message, differently or better than a PowerPoint graph or table? So, does it work? I have no idea, but it does give me something to do when the deer are not showing up and the fish aren't biting.
So that wasn't an Arlo Guthrie song or anything like that? You put that together?
Not the tune part, but the words, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's impressive, yeah.
You're easily impressed. Easily impressed, that's all I gotta say. But don't mess with his Giddings Pro. Okay, so if you do the math, you know, I started in 1972, and that's still impressive. I don't understand. Wow. Anyway, in 1972, so you can do the math. I've been engaged for a while. So my 10,000 foot or 3,000 meter view of the changes in soil science. You know, in the 1970s, we were dominantly, you know, kind of a siloed soil science. So siloed disciplines, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in the next slide. Then in the 1980s, we kind of moved to the awareness where we need to interact more with other disciplines, including other divisions in soil science. And then the soil quality and soil health started to creep in. There was some resistance to this. There was resistance because the hardcore soil scientists, the soil physicists, soil chemists, those that dealt with solid science or silos, couldn't put a number on it. It was too touchy. It was too feely. It was more qualitative than it was science. Well, that, as we know, has evolved into soil health. That's a pretty strong part of what we do right now. 2000s, GIS became an increasingly important part of our mission. We wanted to know more about every little parcel. And then as we gained that information, we've used landscape models to a greater extent, landscape watershed models to help understand what's going on and use those as research tools. So I mentioned silos. In the 1970s, the Soil Science Society had 6 divisions. And I think it's not coincidence that the soil science part of agronomy at that time, and actually prior to that, had specialties that were aligned specifically with these. We had 6 majors or 6 specialty areas that we followed through. Now, what do we have today? How many divisions are in Soil Science Society today? Any idea numbers? I know Mike knows. I would say, and I've got the word divisions up here, but based on what Susan was saying last week, I would call these more communities than divisions. And those are the 14. So we're working together with more people addressing specific issues, integrating science. Font's too small, sorry, my apologies.
We can all look it up. We know how to do it.
You know how to do that, yeah. Good point.
But I'd like to come back when you mentioned the 6 areas in soil science.
Yep.
I always say my master's degree from Iowa State doesn't say soil science. It says soil morphology and genesis.
Yes.
That's actually a diploma.
Yes. So one of the questions I was asked about the conversion of this to a single major, I think it's been a good thing.
Yeah.
I don't know any of us in here, including myself, that got a job, a physician, based on that specialization that was written on the diploma. What gets you your job is the individual you're working with and your research topic, research area. So I think it was a good move. Yeah, and anytime you have comments, please bring them forward. Okay, so we went through this. So I'm going to get a little bit Rick-centric. I apologize for that, and then we'll move on. So where did my professional progression go? It kind of followed that message I tried to give in that introductory thing. We started working in the area of tillage. Now we had other stuff going on at the same time, but these were the dominant focus areas as I went through my profession or through my what do you call it? Profession?
Yeah.
Career. That's the word I was looking for. We started focusing on tillage. As we knew at the time I got here, 1980s, we had to stop beating the bejeebers out of the soil. It wasn't good. Soil was eroding. We had issues. So then we had to ask the question, what impact does reducing tillage have on soil conditions? So there was an interest in the public. There's interested in science. We were in that area. Then if we stopped tilling the soil, which we were promoting, what happened to the amount of compaction that's occurring? And as we worked through that, questions about how deep, impact of tires. Brian worked on some of this with us. He did the work. I worked with him. Then we moved on to cropping systems. We were working on strip intercropping when prairie stripping still wasn't cool. Then there's this. Soil erosion has kind of followed me throughout my career. I started out my master's degree with a soil erosion project, and then I went into modeling. And then the erosion project. Stories are okay? Okay. So where did the soil erosion, daily soil erosion project start? Anyone know this guy? Yes. John Laughlin. He is one of the fathers of soil erosion research modeling. I grew with late John Laughlin. I had watched a weather forecast on TV. This was in the 90s. And the first time I'd ever seen them take a set of radar echoes and try to identify or delineate the amount of precipitation that occurred spatially across Iowa, or at least a significant part of Iowa. It kind of blew me away. So it just happened that the following week, John Laughlin and I were riding together in a car going down to Sheraton to do a rainfall simulation study. And as we're driving along, and John's sitting on the side, I'm driving, I said, John, I said, you know, I saw this weekend a precipitation estimate based on radar returns. I said, what do you think of that? He says, that's good. That's science is evolving. Yeah, it's going to get better. So I said, John, I said, if we can do that, couldn't we also use that information to estimate soil erosion across this space? Now, John's a big guy. He's sitting here like this. Puts his hand on his knee, turns his shoulder. We can. So we spent the rest of the trip down and back talking about, you know, what he thinks can be done, how it can be done. Got back here and we put together a team. We, in this case, John wasn't involved with that other than identifying people, but it involved him and it involved Vitek Krajewski from the University of Iowa, was a radar guy. Brian wasn't, he was not here. Dennis Toddy was here as a postdoc at that time. He says, you have to get Dale Herthman involved, which we did. He still is. David James, Soil Tilth Laboratory, John Opsmer from the statistics. And we put a team together, start asking questions, and voila, the Iowa Daily Erosion Project occurred. And then with much better brains and minds than mine, Brian's one of them, Daryl, they went to remote sensing and went away from the form we'd used before. I'm going to pass on that story. Okay, no, I won't. I've got time and I'll just shut up. We don't have to get through all these. Part of this, and you'd ask points of pride, you know, I was invited to give a keynote or plenary, I'm not sure which one, at the World Soil Erosion Symposium at FAO headquarters in Rome. That was about 5 years ago. They wanted a placeholder so they could put their program together. So I'd been working a little bit on I had a rough draft of the talk I was going to give. Okay, so I sent that to them and they said, we'll replace it when you get here. So I got there, I think 3 days early. I spent 2 days working on one of their desks, put this thing together, polished it up, man. I was comfortable with it. I was good to go. So the next morning I get up there and, you know, I look across this hall. There's, based on their numbers of 500 some odd people, 100 different countries represented. You know, and this grandiose introduction that even stronger than yet, it's not me, can't be me. But anyway, so I get up there and I flip on the slides. And there was a misspelling on that first slide. How in the heck did I miss that? So I go on with my introductory stuff and I push the next slide and that ain't the one that was supposed to be there. So I sweat from places I didn't even know you had sweat glands. And all this stuff goes through your mind instantly. First thing I wanted to blurt out, this is not my slide. No, that's not going to work. You roll with the flow. You simply roll with the flow. You know what you're going to say. And you know who cared in that room out of all those people? Who cared? Just me. So, moral of that story, roll with the flow, do the best you can in that type of position. You're the one that knows more about what you're going to say than anyone else. Go for it. Okay. So another question I was asked, what does my future hold? Well, no one knows exactly what future is going to hold, but based on what I'm doing right now, the future is probably going to be part of that. I co-lead the Daily Erosion Project and with Brian Gelder. He's doing more of the leading than I am, but still sometimes I carry that title. Director of the Iowa Water Center, as Lee mentioned, the PI for the Agriculture Conservation Planning Framework National Hub, which is housed here at Iowa State, is probably going to go on for a few more years at least. And then I want to spend the rest of the time talking about the an idea regarding climate resilience, water management for Iowa property systems. This is the one that I think I'll go gradually ride off into the sunset with, hopefully riding off gently rather than crashing and burning. So I want to go through a few slides about what I think we know that ties this together. Can we do better managing for climate resilience than we're currently doing? I think the answer is absolutely yes, and I think the answer is we must. So let's start on that journey about what we know, what we think we know. And I'm constantly using other people's science. I'm not smart enough to generate my own, but anyways, that's another story another time. Okay, some work that Bruno Basso and his company group did at Michigan State. They did a geospatial study where they identified relative crop yields within every field across the upper Midwest, agricultural field. And what they've identified, something that we knew, those that have run a combine, that have worked in fields, there are certain areas, there are areas within fields that consistently year after year after year yield higher than the field average. There are also areas in that same field that yield lower year after year after year, and then sometimes there are areas with sometimes higher and sometimes lower. High stable yields, low stable yields, and then areas that are unstable. Why is that important? When we're looking at climate resilience, there's 2 or 3 things that come out of that study that's really important, at least in my mind. The areas that are consistently high have a resiliency component that the low yielding areas do not. What is it? Why do these areas that are low yielding, what is it? What are those missing that the other areas don't? We apply fertilizer based on soil tests. That science is good. We adjust pH. The chemistry and nutrition component should be pretty decent across that entire field. Okay, so there's that. And results from that study, and probably not terribly important, but we'll show anyway. When you look across the states that they had done their work, top numbers up here indicate on average 46% of the crop areas were high stable, higher than field average and year after year. 26% lower, low and stable, and then some of these sometimes higher and sometimes lower. Iowa is in here where we got, well, our unstable ones, the one that I'm interested in, is about 33, 34%. Low and stable. Okay, what else do we know? We know that there are areas of Iowa farm fields that are missing topsoil. Paper published by Evan Thaler, actually out of Isaac Larson's group out east, indicated that roughly 35%, I think what's up here, of the field areas is devoid of topsoil. Devoid of topsoil. Okay, so on the previous slide, Basso said that there's about 20-some% that's areas that's low and stable. Is it possible that this is driving or impacting those crop yield values? Now I've got this up here, but we've got better data. Bradley Miller, Meyerbone is working on a geospatial data set. In fact, it's may have developed it, looking at topsoil depth, not only areas that's devoid. But when you put one geospatial data layer on top of another geospatial data layer, we start seeing the possibility of relationships that occur more than just in a plot area, but across a big area that's impacted by a variety of factors. Okay, so there's that question. Then there's PowerPoint. Okay, so the question then could be, so what's the relationship between soil loss and crop yields? If that's a driving factor, we should have some science behind that hypothesis. If this is a plot of corn yield versus a horizon depth. This is data obtained from Tom Casper when he was working at the National Lab of Ag and Environment. It's pretty intuitively obvious what's happening here. As the soil depth goes from 35, 50 inches down to 0 to 5, what happens to crop yield? Goes down. Is that a surprise? Certainly shouldn't be. I've worked in the area a long time, so it's pretty much the way it is. Okay, so that adds fuel to this fire that, yeah, land degradation is driving these yield stability areas. And then the young man sitting in the back of the room, well, the back of the table, it's Satirius and I, were having something that wasn't water on a Friday afternoon after work. And he started talking about the impact of water tables on crop yields. And indicated that at least in some years, and definitely in some locations, the water table is supplying water that's supporting crop production, crop productivity, and crop production. A graph from that publication maize production, different states. The total height of the bar indicates the production potential. This was a modeling study, APSM. And what we see, I mean, there's potential productivity varies between states, which we'd expect. Now, the blue part of the bar is a part of that production that came from, that's water sourced from the water table. So curious if I'm wrong interpreting this, let me know. Okay. What's really unique to me, they took 2012. Did the same thing, but simply focusing on that year. What happens to the size of those blue bars, water sourced from the water table, or production associated with it, as we get to drier conditions? It becomes a much bigger component. This is a modeling study. All models are wrong, some are useful, right? So I sent an email to Bradley Miller and I said, you've done some work on water table depth. And he says, yep. He says, you can find some maps, and he gave me the link, and I pull up, and this is for their estimated water depth based on G-Circle information, soils database. But what was really important to me is this legend down here that most of you probably can't see. Again, my apologies. The depth, this is the depth to the water table for July. I don't know how many years this is across history. I'm guessing they gave you the information that came from G-Circle soil data. 200 centimeters to less than 20. How deep do corn and soybean roots penetrate the soil? I know it varies with soils. What do we typically see?
Typically water table.
Yeah. So is it possible? The story continues to evolve that water is the elephant in the room. If we're going to deal with climate resilience, we have to do a better job of managing. Okay, so I know nothing or very little about water tables, so I found this graphic. And it is water table topography. Okay, what it indicates is the water table is not flat, which I knew that. It's a sloping surface. Yeah, if it's not flat, it's got to be sloping. This is the important one. It's a subdued replica of the topography. In other words, as you go up a hill slope, the distance of separation between the water table and the soil surface increases. Now, this doesn't always happen. We have side hill seeps. We have conditions where this nice utopic thing doesn't occur, but in general, that occurs. Okay, so I got that under my hat now with all these other things that are going around. And then I pulled up this thing. I tried to put some pieces together, and I started asking the question, what is this land surface telling us? First of all, where do we see soil erosion occurring? See this here, okay? It's darker up above, darker below. Okay, so what is the elevation of this location compared to this location? Further up slope. Yeah, so if we go up slope, what's happening to the distance of separation from the water table to that soil surface? It's increasing. Is it possible Is it possible, maybe not on this field, but maybe some of those fields, where we're seeing erosion occurring and we're crediting crop yield loss to soil erosion? Is it possible that part of what we're seeing is a water deficiency? Because these crops don't have the opportunity to gain the supplemental water that the crops lower can. Have we in the soil erosion science been making interpretations about erosion impact on yields that's confounded with supplemental water support? What water does the crop have that grows up here? Precipitation. It's precip. Okay, so now again, looking at that, where would we expect to see maximum runoff? Same spot. So we're theoretically separated from the water source. We're in a position that we've eroded badly. What's the soil health condition here? What's the infiltration capacity of that soil? Okay, so I asked a colleague, a buddy of mine, with the Daily Erosion Project. I said, can you draw me a map of water runoff for just pick a field in a watershed? Well, he picked this one, Tipton Creek, and I don't even know what it is. There's probably multiple Tipton Creeks. Okay, so this is a color-coded map of slope percent. The brighter the color, the steeper the slope. It's the slope of the previous picture that you saw. Okay, the slopes are steepest right here along those ridges that you saw in the previous graph. This is a color-coded map of estimated runoff. Darker the color, the greater amount of runoff that's occurring. Okay, we go from light color, dark color, then we get to the peaks. Goes back a little bit light again. Why would we expect less runoff in those tops of the hills? You haven't eroded as badly. The slopes are not as great as it is on the side slope. So where would we expect water shortage to occur based on the Daily Erosion Project estimates? Right here we see along those edges. Or in that previous slide, we saw those light colored areas. Now let's go back to this graph. We are interpreting this as an erosion-driven crop yield loss. And I think it's not, erosion is important. What do you expect the depth of the water table to be here? Well, first of all, where would we typically find the deep topsoils? Hilltops, hill bottoms? Bottoms. Going to be the bottoms where all that eroded soil has been deposited. So where would you expect to see access to the water table for crops that are growing in this field? I'd expect it to be down here. What do you suppose the depth of the water table is where that soil is thin? Can crops access? I don't know. Maybe not.
That's also pretty high bulk density stuff up there.
Right. There's other problems that are affecting it. That's part of the soil health degradation. Okay, so we put this graphic together at another Friday afternoon event. Sirius encouraged me to not go for an AFRI medium-sized proposal. Go after a big one. so we're putting together a NEFA-SAS. But this kind of summarizes what I mentioned, what I've been trying to drive at. In Iowa, if you're going to have climate resilience, you have to have drainage. You have to have drainage. We're in a drought mindset right now. We've had 4 years of drought. Okay, so as you move upslope, okay, we're happy. Further upslope, we're getting marginally happy because we get to a point where the crops can no longer access this water table in this utopic graphic. So what could we do? We've identified the problem, so what can we do? Well, let's push a button one more before we talk about that. If we're going to deal with erosion, most likely it's going to be in this area. there's just two options right now my feeble mind has come up with in terms of management potential. One is to grow a crop with a root system. We always thinking above ground. We always think above ground. What's the configuration? What's the size? What's the how much residue above ground? We don't manage for below ground. Are there crops that have value, that have a root system that's deeper, that could potentially access some of this supplemental water when necessary or needed? Yeah, there are. If I'm going to grow corn and beans only, if I'm going to put cover cropping on, where's it going to be? I want to improve soil health. Where is it the most important place on this graphic for it to occur? Maximize infiltration. You got to have infiltration. So there's probably other things on that stories that you can come up with that are better than mine. But yes, can we improve climate resilience? We can. What's it about? It's about water. It has to be about water. So yeah, field studies, yes, so we've already talked about that, the confounding nature of soil erosion and position on the landscape. So I want to end with just a couple of reflections that I've come on through my career. I was asked to do that too. What is the point of pride? Probably the Daily Erosion Project, and not because I can do it. I can't. But team members that we put together can. Brian's one of them. Brian knows. Brian, Daryl, right now, Eduardo, Tate. So really, really happy about that. Words of wisdom. For those younger faculty members, graduate students, people-based proposals do not work. I've tried and I've been involved multiple times where a group of people get together, friends, really, really smart people. Let's put a proposal together. It doesn't work. However, idea-based proposals do. If someone in that group has a great idea, you build the team around the idea. Okay? Another bit of wisdom, step outside your comfort zone. We all feel most comfortable doing what we do. Was I comfortable this morning, did what I did when I came in here? Absolutely not. Hell, I could hardly handle this mouth. Growth occurs outside your zone. Absolutely necessary. Take risks, but take them strategically. If you're battling for tenure, don't take on a high-risk project where you may or may not be able to publish. At some point in your career, if you want to have a big impact, don't be afraid to take that risk. It may involve stepping outside your comfort zone. And one other item that's not on here, leave the U.S. if you're a U.S. citizen. Those international have come here, great. Cross boundaries. You learn more about yourself, more about your science, more about other people's science when you engage in their community, not yours. Amen?
Sounds great. Thank you, Dr. Cruse. So Rick will answer any question you want.
I'll try.
That's an answer.
Yeah, well, the wrong answers are cheap. It's the right answers are more costly.
Rick, you just mentioned the importance of getting out of the country and doing other things. And I know you've done work in China, for example. You've also worked in Eastern Europe, I think. I wonder, could you reflect on work in Europe where I think you were, I would say, building institutions, and tell us a little bit about your work in that area. That was I don't think you're doing it right now, but it was an important part of what you have done, I think.
No, thanks, Mike. Can people outside, did they hear the question? Okay, just briefly. I've worked in Eastern Europe some when I reflect on that. It was a great, great experience. Okay, so how it come about, story time. I just divorced from my wife, and that's, well, it's important, not because of the personal part, but because I had latitude to move. Okay, and just serendipitously, I was preparing for a sabbatical to go to Australia when the Dean Topol at the time, called me in the office. Heard us all. He says, Rick, he says, how would you like to go to Hungary? It's just not as blue. I don't even know if I could find Hungary on the map. I'm sorry, my geography is not that good. I'm typical American from that perspective. And I hemmed and hawed a little bit. Yeah, I never thought about that. I knew it was the Eastern Bloc. He says, that's okay. He says, you don't need to tell me now. He says, you can tell me tomorrow. So I thought about it. Why not? Why not? Go stretch, get out of your comfort zone. And what's the biggest fear Americans have when they travel international? Language. And if I can't communicate, Hungarian is one of the most difficult languages to learn. Okay, so part of the reflection on this, Mike, is that it's much easier to speak English slow and simple than it is to learn another language, whether it be Chinese, whether it be Hungarian, because virtually everywhere in the world, people are studying English. It's the language of science, fortunately for us, kids especially. So that was number one. I learned from that. The opportunity to interact in science in that Eastern Bloc country was challenging. The quality of science, the kind of science is different. You know, publishing was important, but publishing would be like writing a report. Now, there are other institutions other than the one that I was in, that science is really good in Hungary. So the opportunity to bridge, remember there's a language issue too when you're dealing with science. So that also is a challenge, but it's great. It's a great opportunity. My main focus when I was there was teaching. That college that I was at in a little town called Gingish, I still can't pronounce it right. How would you say it?
You're better than I.
He would try and visit there. Yeah, well, Bradley was better than either of us. Oh, okay. So part of this story, one of the students in the class that I was teaching. Okay, let me back up. Teaching class. These kids that took the class had studied English, and they could do social English. Hi, how are you? What's the weather like? What's it going to be like? When you start talking about bulk density, cation exchange capacity, and it was a foreign language to them too. Okay, so part of this story, one of the students in my class, I always invited him to come to US. We'll show you around. One of the students, a young lady, wanted to come and visit. And she came and visited. She brought her cousin, I think it was a cousin. And, you know, what are you going to do with an old guy touring around campus town? So I called Bradley Miller and another guy that was in the Solon Water Club. I said, there's a couple of people here from maybe you want to show them around. Well, now guess who's Bradley married to? So anyway, that's another sidebar there. And we have continued connections. So there's more stories than I can shake a stick at. I worked there for 10 years, for about 3 months each year. Okay, when we were talking about the opportunity to work virtually, one of the reasons I could do that, I was pretty heavily involved with the distance program, the Masters of Science in Agronomy, so I could teach from over there while I was teaching over there. I mean, I could teach here for Iowa State while I was teaching over there, or lecturing over there, or you know, it's extreme. They're extremely appreciative. And one of the things I've learned, if you travel international and you're a U.S. citizen, be humble. If you want to win friends, be humble. You know, a lot of people, some of the people here understand my name is Poor Rick. Yeah, it just, okay, so how did it happen? When I went there, I introduced myself as Poor Rick. Everybody sees the American from Iowa State University. Iowa State University is held in pretty high regard on the international scene. And just tell people jokingly. So anyway, the humility, try to learn the language. Try to learn some words. Just try to learn some words. Be willing to make yourself look like a fool. Let people laugh at you a little bit if they will. So anyway, I've belabor that a lot. We could have lots of talks about that. Yes.
Fundamentally an institutional development project, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You were there
Well,
to make sure the institution.
what I think happened, well, yes, but really what I think happened is our dean and their president were at a party. And after a little bit of this drink called Paulinka,
Yeah.
they worked out this
Right.
agreement. They had two people come and visit here first, and then as a part of the exchange, I went back over there.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
anyway, Bob, you had it.
Yeah, I want to say a few comments about your ideas on the water table and its role in providing some water for crop growth. I think it's a good step. Like the idea is a good step forward. I'll give a little bit of background. Where I studied for my PhD was in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and it's a completely irrigated agricultural system. And then from there, I moved here to Iowa to a faculty position. And when we talked about crop production functions, it was always, yield versus water. It could be either water applied irrigation water, or it would be evapotranspiration, how much water, consumptive use, how much water was used by the crop. When I came here, all the crop production functions were on fertility. Nobody mentioned water at all. It's like a total, completely different culture, completely different mindset. In Las Cruces, people fertilized, but they just took that for granted. They were all concerned was water. And here in Iowa, whatever God provided from rainfall, it was just taken for granted. We managed the fertilizers, right? The amount of fertilizer. It was always weird to me because, like my colleagues I would talk with that were involved in fertilization in particular, they would say, wow, that's a drought year and blah, blah, blah. They kind of like blow it off or categorize it, but never really consider so much the importance of water for the crop yield, crop growth. So I really think you're onto something to consider that, particularly in your study of water-driven erosion. I mean, water is important for the overland flow, for everything. So I just wanted to encourage a little bit, in addition to just the water table, I mean, just think about the whole soil hydrology.
Oh, yeah.
The water holding capabilities, the plant available water, not only from the water table, but I mean, I think if we expand ourselves a little bit more to include the soil hydrology in general, as well as the traditional emphasis we've had on fertility, it's a step forward.
Yeah.
But it's a step forward, what you're talking about today about the water table as well.
That's a great point, Bob. If you look at the two extremes in terms of water study, where we irrigate, how much research have we put into that? Lots. How much research has we put into drainage? Where we excess? Lots. How much work have we put on and addressed in the between parts? Much less. Yeah, hydrology is absolutely important.
We have a question online.
Yep.
Emily Heaton asks, do the non-native English speakers on this group agree with the advice to simply speak English slowly rather than being concerned that we can't speak the local language?
Great question.
I agree. Yeah, very good.
All right.
Very good what?
Speak it slowly.
Yeah, I've learned that so many times, especially if you work and thanks, Emily, great question. As you move to different countries, if you're mobile, there's multiple different languages to learn. I respect immensely anyone that comes here and tries to learn in English. Oh my God. Just the fact, the struggles I had going to graduate school, speaking the language, to cross that boundary, tough. Yes.
With regard to that, the idea of when you were in the Eastern Europe and trying to speak, you said, like colloquial English, like, hey, how's it going? Easy enough. But when you start talking CEC and bulk density and all that, how did you go about overcoming that? Like, what was the pathway to get that connection made?
Great question. Pictures. Graphics.
Pictures, yeah.
Once you're in a group, class sizes range from about 6 to as much as 20. Once one individual understood it, then the native language takes over, explaining to the others. That one person becomes a teacher, which was kind of cool in itself. So one of the experience, sitting around a table in the evening what do you do in the Eastern Bloc countries when you have a party? And you're drinking. And the countries are small enough and they have a lot of friends and they come from different locations. We'd be sitting around a table and we would have English, Russian, Hungarian, and Poland, German, all being taught at the same time. And sometimes if somebody wanted to talk to B, they'd have to go through C. It was just cool. Language is so big in other countries, much bigger, much more important than it is here.
I have a question I have to ask for that. So you've been here a long time, you've worked lots of places, done great things. So should, when you were a graduate student, there might have been a foreign language required. Should we go back to requiring a foreign language?
Next question. I think it should be required as an undergraduate degree.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was wondering.
I think, and it's not totally because you learn that language, although that's an incredible benefit. It teaches you to think
Yeah,
in a way
you have to think
different.
differently. I agree.
Yes.
I agree.
David?
Yes, Dr. Cruse, I have a question which I believe will help some of us. I was looking at your slides and your trajectory and all the kind of accomplishments, which is very impressive. Now, can you,
Easily.
I know you shake your head, that's why I said. Now, the question is, any low point, you don't need to mention what that low point is. Any low point ever in that path and how you managed it to be able to, since you mentioned resilience, how did you manage it to get where you are today that we can listen to you and pick on some of the wisdom from you?
And you're talking about me and not this people.
I'm talking about poor Cruse.
Yeah, poor Rick. Yes.
Poor Rick.
Yeah. It's working with good people and treating people like you'd like to be treated. We have, and I use this as an example, when we recruit faculty members, what do we look at? Man, we look at publications, we look at numbers. An unappreciated component of new hires, and to bring it to me, working with students, is to work with a personality that you can work with, that can work in a team. Me and a prima donna that can't speak to someone else, it's not gonna happen. So it's connecting with people. It's doing basically here. Sometimes you gotta step outside your comfort zone. You've got to stretch. And give your mind time to be creative. One of the lucky parts in my life is I got my mom's mind, or part of it, where and I had a brilliant, just an excellent mentor as an advisor, Dr. William Larson at the University of Minnesota. He had the capacity to look at a problem here and look at a discipline, a science here, and here, and then pull those together. You're doing good science in the area of soil management is like arranging a three-dimensional puzzle. And if you can do that, not everyone can, and I'm not good at it, but that's the closest thing that I can do. This whole thing here, we talked about water resilience. It's water, it's erosion, and that's a really neat thing from my perspective. I have an opportunity as my swan song to work with the science disciplines and research that I've worked with throughout my career. So I didn't answer your question, I don't think, but I've tried.
But people drive you crazy. Part of what he said is people are your success story and they drive you crazy. And since we're running out of time, so is there a question?
One question online.
Good.
So John Ming Yu online says, great to hear from you, Rick. In retrospect, things are not that complicated and we could have figured them out earlier. Question mark. Same for breeding and genetics. But then what was delaying the process of figuring it out or having a better understanding? Was that all reasonable because we have to wait for technology, analytics, analysis and modeling, and design studies to be ready, and also people, team to be there?
I think yes. Yeah, it's all part. The part I did mention here was the genetics. Gosh, we're yielding with much less water, and that's genetics driven. The other is opportunities. If you are beginning a career, I'll make this quick. You have to focus on silos. You have to focus on publications. You have to focus on publish now. Where am I in my career relative to this idea? If I don't publish another paper, I mean, that's not good. That's not good. I'm not saying that. But I have the opportunity to do something that is a little bit risky. I can work with different people. And Soterius is a big part of what I'm doing. Brian, Andy. I have the opportunity to do and put these puzzle pieces together that beginning scientists probably don't, unless they're really good and have been successful and got their tenure package.
I just want to put a stamp on that idea, right? That it doesn't just require people who have a collaborative attitude and a team-based sort of thing. It requires a structure around us, an administration and leadership that embraces that. Sometimes hard to articulate property that people have or spending their time on. So I'm not saying we don't have, those ideas sometimes around us, but it doesn't float to the top often enough that just being a good collaborator and working on a team and working toward a shared goal isn't something that you have a section for on your portfolio. You don't spend time talking about that. There is a table with the impact factor of, no one else, it's just something we just don't care about. It's just a quick summary. Honestly, for efficiency, sometimes people call that laziness. But if you had an administrator sitting there waiting to get a compelling story about a collaboration that produced, an original idea, if that was what was on the other end of this, I think we would spend more time doing it. And so I don't know, what to do with that going. Maybe some of the people in this room will be administrators sometime before too much longer. But I think we should promote that idea from our above, so that we're more likely to do it from our end.
Thank you.
Great job, Rick. Let's thank Dr. Cruse again. Thank you very much.